Respected friends, let me start with a simple truth that most people learn far too late in life. Nothing in this world collapses overnight, and nothing meaningful is built in a single moment. What ruins lives usually does so quietly. What builds greatness usually does so invisibly, and the difference between the two is not talent, luck, or dramatic effort. It is what you consistently choose to do and what you consistently choose to ignore. Neglect doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It says, skip today. It says, you'll fix it later. It says, one day won't matter, and most of the time it's right. One day doesn't matter. That's the trap, because the real cost of neglect is never charged daily. It's billed in bulk years later with interest. Health neglected becomes illness. Relationships neglected become distance. Skills neglected become irrelevance. And by the time the invoice arrives, most people are shocked, not realizing they approved the charges themselves. Consistency, on the other hand, is deeply unimpressive at first. It doesn't feel heroic. It doesn't look intelligent. It doesn't earn applause. It's repetitive, dull, and often lonely. Yet it has a strange advantage. It works even when you're tired, uninspired, or unsure. A small right action done repeatedly has a kind of quiet power that overwhelms almost everything else in the long run. Here's the uncomfortable part. Life doesn't reward intention. It rewards behavior. It doesn't care what you meant to do, only what you kept doing. Time is brutally fair that way. It multiplies whatever you feed it, good or bad, and it never forgets. So today's conversation is not about motivation or dramatic change. It's about understanding the true price of ignoring the small things and the astonishing reward of showing up again and again, especially when no one is watching. Because in the end, the future is not built by big decisions made once, but by small decisions honored daily. Ladies and gentlemen, neglect almost never arrives with alarms or warning signs. It does not crash into your life like a storm. Instead, it slips in quietly, disguised as comfort, delay, or harmless choice. One missed workout, one postponed conversation, one ignored responsibility feels insignificant in isolation. That is why neglect is so dangerous. It convinces intelligent people that nothing serious is happening, when in reality a slow and costly process has already begun. The most expensive mistakes in life are rarely dramatic. They are ordinary decisions repeated long enough to become invisible. Health does not collapse because of one bad meal, but because of years of ignoring the body's signals. Finances do not fall apart because of one purchase, but because of consistent indifference to spending, saving, and planning. Relationships do not break because of one argument, but because attention, respect, and presence were quietly withdrawn over time. Neglect works patiently, allowing people to feel safe while damage compounds beneath the surface. What makes neglect particularly deceptive is that it often feels reasonable. You are busy, you are tired, you will handle it tomorrow. Each excuse sounds logical, even responsible. Yet logic without discipline becomes self-betrayal. The problem is not the single delay, it is the habit of delay. Over time, the gap between what should be done and what is actually done widens, and crossing that gap becomes emotionally and mentally heavier with every passing day. There is also a hidden psychological cost. Neglect erodes self-trust. Each time you ignore a responsibility you know matters, you send yourself a quiet message that your own standards are optional. That message compounds just like neglected habits do. Confidence fades not because of failure, but because of avoidance. You start doubting your ability to follow through, even on small commitments. Eventually, the weight of unfinished business becomes a constant background pressure, draining energy and clarity. Perhaps the cruelest part of neglect is that it charges interest. Problems ignored do not stay the same size. They grow more complex, more expensive, and more painful to fix later. A small health issue becomes a chronic condition. A minor skill gap becomes career stagnation. A simple apology delayed becomes permanent distance. By the time action feels unavoidable, the cost is no longer proportional to the original effort required. Neglect is rarely loud, but it is always expensive, and the bill is always delivered when time, options, and patience are already limited. Ladies and gentlemen, Consistency is a quiet force, often underestimated because it lacks the drama of sudden bursts of effort or the excitement of raw inspiration. People tend to chase motivation, believing it will fuel their progress, but motivation is fleeting. It comes and goes like the wind. The reality is that success, progress, and mastery rarely come from rare moments of enthusiasm. They come from persistent action, repeated steadily over time, even when motivation has vanished. This is where consistency steps in. It is the unwavering commitment to do what matters day in and day out, independent of mood, circumstance, or external approval. Consistency is not flashy, but it is effective, and it compounds in ways that sudden efforts never can. Consider the life of someone who studies or works diligently. On days when they feel inspired, they may achieve a lot, but these days are unpredictable. The real advantage goes to the person who shows up daily, applying themselves with discipline regardless of feelings. That small, almost imperceptible effort, doing the task when you don't feel like it, builds skill, knowledge, and momentum over time. The compounding effect of consistent effort is astonishing. A single action repeated consistently accumulates into expertise, credibility, and results that often seem disproportionate to the effort invested. Consistency also guards against the volatility of human emotion. Motivation is an unreliable driver because it depends on transient feelings and external stimuli. If we rely solely on motivation, our progress will mirror the fluctuations of our emotions, leaving us vulnerable to inconsistency, procrastination, and unfulfilled potential. By contrast, consistency creates a buffer. It transforms progress from a fragile, hope-dependent endeavor into a predictable, reliable outcome. It allows you to ride through the inevitable cycles of energy highs and lows, personal distractions, or unexpected setbacks without derailing your path. Another powerful aspect of consistency is the psychological edge it provides. Each small, steady action reinforces self-discipline, builds confidence, and strengthens the habit loop. Once consistency becomes a habit, it reduces the mental friction required to act, and performing the right actions becomes automatic rather than a matter of willpower. This is why individuals who may not feel the surge of motivation still outperform those who rely exclusively on it. They have built a system that works whether they feel like it or not. Consistency also amplifies learning. Every repeated effort provides feedback, insight, and opportunities to adjust and improve. Mistakes made consistently are LES. Sons learned consistently, accelerating mastery. In contrast, sporadic effort leaves gaps, slows growth, and often disguises weaknesses until it's too late. Over time, those who commit to consistent practice accumulate not just results, but resilience, adaptability, and a track record of reliable achievement. Ladies and gentlemen, time is impartial. It does not favor effort, genius, or luck. It simply progresses moment by moment, day by day, indifferent to our ambitions or complaints. What it does reward, however, is repetition, the steady, deliberate application of effort over long periods. The outcomes we achieve are a direct reflection of the actions we take consistently, not the intentions we harbor or the sporadic bursts of activity we indulge in. Every day is an opportunity, and every repeated action, no matter how small, compounds over time, producing results that often astonish in their scale and significance. Understanding this principle changes how one approaches work, learning, and life. The key lies in recognizing that time is a multiplier. A single, isolated effort may yield minimal results, while consistent, repeated effort, however modest in the moment, grows exponentially. Think of it like small deposits in a bank of experience, skill, or discipline. Each deposit might seem inconsequential on its own, but as they accumulate, the interest generated is profound. Success is rarely a result of luck or sudden inspiration. It is the natural product of small, intelligent actions repeated without fail. People who underestimate this principle often chase dramatic breakthroughs, yet time rewards the patient, methodical approach far more reliably than it does hasty attempts at brilliance. This neutrality of time also teaches humility. It does not distinguish between good intentions and actionable habits. Wishing for success, talking about effort, or planning in AB. Abstract terms achieves nothing unless those actions are repeated consistently. The passage of days continues unabated, indifferent to excuses or delays. What matters is the alignment between what we repeatedly do and the outcomes we desire. Those who understand this adjust their mindset from seeking quick wins to cultivating sustainable routines that reinforce progress. Moreover, the neutrality of time magnifies the consequences of neglect as much as it amplifies consistent effort. Small mistakes ignored, skipped practices, or unaddressed responsibilities accumulate silently, eventually producing significant setbacks. Conversely, small, well-chosen actions repeated day after day generate cumulative advantages that compound into extraordinary results. The principle is simple but profound. Time itself is not biased, but it always honors consistent input. The longer the duration of repeated effort, the greater the effect, and the more clearly the fruits of labor manifest. Ultimately, this understanding shifts focus from short-term excitement to long-term discipline. It encourages patience, foresight, and an unwavering commitment to daily action. Those who master this see time not as a threat or a limited resource to panic over, but as an impartial partner that magnifies their repeated efforts into tangible achievement, personal growth, and lasting results. Ladies and gentlemen, extraordinary results rarely spring from dramatic, high-risk actions or grand gestures. More often, they are the quiet product of repetitive, mundane actions executed with discipline and purpose. These boring actions, the ones that seem tedious, repetitive, or unremarkable in the moment, are the true drivers of lasting success. People tend to overlook them because they lack immediate glamour or excitement, but it is precisely this lack of spectacle that allows them to compound and accumulate quietly over time, creating outcomes that far exceed expectations. The nature of these actions is deceptively simple: showing up daily, completing small tasks, refining skills, maintaining discipline, and consistently honoring commitments. Each action by itself may seem inconsequential, but when performed regularly, they build systems, habits, and frameworks that amplify productivity and achievement. A person who writes consistently, even for short periods each day, eventually produces a body of work that can influence thousands. A student who reviews notes or practices problems routinely will surpass peers who rely on last-minute inspiration. A professional who consistently delivers quality, even in minor tasks, earns trust, credibility, and opportunities that are invisible in the short term but monumental over time. Boring actions are powerful because they reduce the reliance on unpredictable factors like talent, luck, or extraordinary bursts of effort. They transform success into a process rather than a series of fortunate events. This process-oriented approach mitigates risk and creates resilience, as it does not depend on fluctuating motivation or rare inspiration. Instead, it builds momentum through repetition, ensuring progress even when conditions are less than ideal or when energy is low. The cumulative effect of these small, disciplined efforts often exceeds the sum of any individual action, creating what seems like disproportionate results in retrospect. Another critical aspect is that boring actions foster mastery. Repetition allows mistakes to be noticed, corrected, and refined over time. Skills deepen, understanding grows, and intuition develops. While flashy or spontaneous efforts may occasionally yield success, they rarely produce consistent mastery because they lack the feedback loop that comes from steady practice. Those who embrace these mundane actions often find themselves achieving more, not because they work harder in dramatic moments, but because they work smarter, steadily, and with patience. In essence, the true power of boring actions lies in their compounding effect. They quietly accumulate, shaping character, skill, and results in ways that are often invisible at first. While they may seem trivial or uninspiring in isolation, their persistent execution creates outcomes that appear extraordinary, almost magical, to outside observers who fail to see the years of consistent effort behind them. Ladies and gentlemen, the difference between failure and success is rarely a single monumental decision, a sudden stroke of luck, or a dramatic act of courage. More often, it is defined by the sum of daily behaviors, the small choices, habits, and actions we take consistently over time. Success is not a destination reached in a single bound. It is the natural outcome of repeated, deliberate actions aligned with a clear purpose. Conversely, failure often accumulates quietly, the result of overlooked responsibilities, postponed tasks, and neglected opportunities. Each day presents countless small decisions, and the pattern of these decisions compounds to determine long-term outcomes in ways that are often invisible in the moment. Daily behavior shapes competence, character, and credibility. Showing up consistently, following through on commitments, and maintaining discipline in ordinary tasks builds a foundation that supports larger achievements. On the other hand, neglecting these daily actions erodes trust, undermines progress, and widens the gap between intention and result. The consequences of inaction or inconsistency are rarely immediate, which makes them easy to ignore, but over weeks, months, and years, they accumulate into setbacks that can be devastating. This is why attention to small, everyday behaviors is more critical than chasing inspiration or relying on rare moments of brilliance. Moreover, daily behavior influences mindset and resilience. Each day that you act deliberately, even in seemingly minor ways, reinforces self-discipline and strengthens confidence. These habits create momentum, making it easier to act in alignment with your goals in the future. Conversely, neglecting responsibilities or yielding to procrastination weakens resolve and builds patterns of avoidance that are difficult to break. Success is rarely a product of extraordinary talent. It is more often the result of ordinary people who consistently do what others skip or delay. Daily behavior also magnifies learning and growth. Every small effort, every repeated task provides feedback and insight that, when compounded over time, builds expertise and adaptability. Individuals who fail to prioritize these daily actions often miss critical learning opportunities and gradually fall behind, not because they lack potential, but because they underestimate the power of consistent, incremental progress. Each day offers a chance to reinforce good habits or correct mistakes. Yet many squander these opportunities, unaware that these small choices are the building blocks of either lasting achievement or enduring failure. Ultimately, the bridge between failure and success is constructed not with grand gestures, but with the bricks of daily behavior. It is the accumulation of small, disciplined actions over time that separates those who achieve meaningful results from those who merely dream. The people who reach extraordinary outcomes do not rely on fleeting inspiration. They rely on consistent, purposeful behavior, understanding that the quiet repetition of right actions is what turns ambition into achievement.